How's the water today?
Right. The classic metaphor.
Yeah, exactly. The thinker referenced in our source material today, they're known as the time traveler. They use this exact scenario to point out something just fascinating about perception. Because, I mean, if you ask a fish about the water, the fish wouldn't even understand the question.
It wouldn't even know what water is.
Right. The fish never thinks about the water. It shapes every single dart of the fin, every breath, every aspect of its survival. I mean, the fish absolutely cannot live without it. Yet the water remains completely invisible to the fish, just simply through the sheer force of familiarity.
It's a haunting metaphor, honestly, because the immediate implication forces us to turn that lens right back on ourselves. We like to consider ourselves to be these highly conscious, rational beings.
Oh yeah, we think we're in total control.
Exactly. We think we're acutely aware of our surroundings and all our choices. But the reality presented in our sources today suggests that, well, we are swimming in deep, powerful currents that we don't even notice. We are constantly interacting with this invisible architecture that just dictates our behavior.
Okay, let's unpack this, because what we have in front of us today is an incredibly profound dialogue between two individuals, Maya and Nick. And they basically spend this whole text debating and analyzing the water that you and I swim in every single day.
Yeah, it's a really deep dive into human behavior.
It is. And the mission of this deep dive today is to follow their exploration, to uncover this invisible architecture that's shaping your life right now. We're going to look at how Maya and Nick attempt to basically redefine human nature.
Which is a huge task.
Massive.
Yeah.
And we'll explore their argument that the exhaustion, or that burnout you might feel at the end of a long week, well, it might not be a personal failing at all. According to their dialogue, it might just be a feature of a completely broken machine.
Yeah. And to even begin understanding this water, Maya and Nick argue that we have to examine what we just blindly accept as our absolute reality. And they do this by looking backward through human history.
Right.
Their dialogue points out that entire civilizations accepted societal structures as entirely normal and inevitable. Structures that, you and I today find completely abhorrent.
Right, like what kind of structures?
Well, Maya brings up eras where slavery was considered the natural, unquestionable economic engine of the entire world. And Nick points to periods where monarchs claimed unquestionable authority through, divine right, or times when massive populations genuinely believed that certain demographics of humans were just biologically inferior.
Yeah, and the crucial observation Maya makes there isn't just that these awful things happened, but how they were perceived by the everyday person actually living inside them. Because the vast majority of people in those eras, they weren't waking up every morning thinking they were participating in a deeply evil artificial system.
Not at all. They believed they were simply living in reality. The walls of their societal prison were just entirely invisible to them. The underlying assumptions of their economy and their morality, that was just the water they swam in.
Wow.
And this leads Maya and Nick to pose what might be, honestly, the most uncomfortable question in their entire dialogue.
Hit me with it.
They ask, what is completely invisible to us right now? What fundamental structures are we accepting as just the way things are that our grandchildren are going to look back on with absolute disbelief?
Oh, man. See, if I'm listening to this, I'm probably thinking about my own life and wondering just how deep this goes. Like, are things like my daily ambitions part of this invisible water? The drive to get a promotion, the pressure to save up for a bigger house, the anxiety of trying to outperform the people I graduated with?
Yes, all of it. Maya and Nick introduced this concept of the inherited map of reality to explain this exact phenomenon.
The inherited map. I love that phrasing.
It's a brilliant way to conceptualize the water. Just consider how a physical map functions when you hold it in your hands. When someone hands you a map of a city, you don't question the terrain, do you?
No, I just assume it's accurate.
Exactly. You don't ask why a border is drawn in a specific place or why a road curves the way it does. You accept the map as an objective representation of reality. And you basically spend all your cognitive energy just trying to figure out how to navigate it as efficiently as possible.
Right, you're just trying to get from point A to point B.
Yeah. And Maya argues that every single generation inherits a psychological and societal map. And this map dictates the coordinates of what success means, what failure looks like, what is considered valuable, and ultimately what is even deemed possible for a human life.
And we spend decades navigating by this inherited map without ever stopping to ask who actually drew the borders in the first place. Like, who decided that ultimate success is defined by a corner office and a massive investment portfolio? Who decided that failing means you aren't advancing your career as fast as your peers?
Hmm.
Maya and Nick's dialogue really highlights how we rarely question who decided that human worth should be measured almost entirely by economic output.
And because those questions are almost never asked out loud, Nick points out that we begin to just assume the map represents natural law. We look
Yeah.
around at this modern world that is completely driven by accumulation, endless growth, fierce individual competition, and we just shrug our shoulders. We tell ourselves, well, that's just human nature. We are competitive animals.
But, okay, let me play devil's advocate for a second here, because Nick actually brings this up in the dialogue too. Isn't competition a fundamental part of being a biological organism? I mean, survival of the fittest is drilled into us from middle school biology.
Sure.
If you put two people in a room with limited resources, they're going to compete. It feels like a pretty big stretch to call competition an artificial map when it seems so deeply hardwired into our evolutionary biology.
And that's exactly what you'd think, right? But Maya aggressively dismantles that assumption in the text. And she brings in evolutionary neuroscience to do it, which is fascinating.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, the dialogue explores how our brains evolved over hundreds of thousands of years. The vast majority of that evolutionary process took place in small, nomadic, hunter-gatherer groups. In those harsh early environments, cooperation wasn't just some philosophical ideal or a nice moral choice. It was the literal mechanical prerequisite for survival.
Because an isolated human was a dead human.
Exactly. Sharing resources, protecting the sick, hunting communally, raising children together, those were the evolutionary traits that successfully passed on genes.
So the text details the actual biological hardware we developed for this. Like, we are physically built for collaboration.
Yes, the neurological evidence Maya presents is so compelling. She points to mirror neurons, for example, which fire specifically to create empathy. When you see someone else physically injure themselves, or even when you see them experience profound joy, your brain simulates a shadow of that exact feeling.
Right, like when you wince when someone stubs their toe.
Precisely. Your brain does this so you can connect with their internal state, which she also brings up oxytocin, the bonding hormone. Your system is literally flooded with oxytocin when you establish trust and collaborate effectively with someone else. Maya's ultimate conclusion from all this data is pretty striking. She says the human brain does not possess a localized competition center, but it does possess a highly sophisticated, deeply ingrained connection center.
Wow. Okay, so we take a brain that is literally wired for empathetic connection, right? A brain that rewards itself with oxytocin for cooperating, and we force it to constantly compete against everyone around it.
Yeah.
That is like taking a freshwater fish, dropping it into the middle of the salty ocean, and then scratching our heads wondering why it's violently struggling to survive. It is entirely the wrong environment for the organism.
That's a perfect way to put it. The environment violently clashes with our biology. And Maya and Nick use this friction to explain so much of our modern anxiety. Because the environment shapes the brain's responses, right? When you take that cooperative freshwater brain and plunge it into a modern economic operating system that constantly rewards ruthless competition, the brain just gets completely confused. It's plunged into a system that screams at you every single day through advertising, through corporate culture, that there is simply not enough to go around, that your neighbor is your direct rival for resources, and that your fundamental worth is inextricably tied to your material wealth.
God, that sounds exhausting.
Yeah.
And the brain adapts to that environment, obviously, but it does so out of a panicked survival instinct, not out of its base nature. The dialogue points out how this plays out in like a modern corporate performance review.
Oh, that's a great example from the text.
Yeah, you have an ancient tribal brain sitting in an office chair being told it is ranked against its peers on a forced curve. The brain doesn't see a spreadsheet, The amygdala interprets that ranking as a literal threat of exile from the tribe, which historically meant starvation.
Yeah, the resulting stress is immense. We learn to compete because we are trained to do so by an environment that manufactures artificial scarcity. The tragedy, as Maya articulates it, is that we look at that deeply anxious, trained behavior, and we mistake it for human nature. We point to the cutthroat corporate executive or the relentless consumer and say, look, humans are naturally greedy.
When really we're just reacting.
Exactly. Maya argues that no, humans aren't naturally greedy. We are just highly adaptable, and we have adapted to survive in a profoundly competitive, high-stress architecture.
So if our environment is actively training us to act against our own cooperative biology, We have to look really closely at the mechanics of that environment. We have to look at the operating system that's producing these exhausted, burned-out humans.
Right. And Nick brings in the time traveler's second anchor analogy here to help visualize this operating system. It's the defective factory.
Oh, tell me about the factory.
He asks Maya to imagine a massive, highly efficient factory. And every single day, this factory produces defective products. So what does the factory's management do? They react. The managers start working longer shifts. The quality control inspectors are pushed to their absolute limits. A massive binder of new compliance rules is introduced.
Just doubling down on the process.
Exactly. But day after day, the defects just keep rolling down the assembly line. Everyone in the building is stressed. Everyone is working to the bone until finally one exhausted worker stops and asks the forbidden question. Has anyone actually examined the machine itself?
Has anyone examined the machine? Maya and Nick argue that modern society is entirely focused on treating the symptoms of the defective products while actively ignoring the root cause. I mean, think about it. We build massive prison complexes to deal with the symptoms of poverty and crime.
Yeah.
We write thousands of pages of complex financial regulations to try and curb systemic corruption. We prescribe mountains of pharmaceuticals and sell millions of self-help books to deal with an epidemic of stress, isolation, and dissatisfaction.
And Maya's point is that we rarely pause to ask the structural question. Is the machine itself perfectly designed to produce these exact outcomes? Is the society we've built functioning exactly as its underlying architecture dictates? Because if you have a machine designed to prioritize profit over human well-being, you cannot be surprised when it produces burned-out humans.
See, here's where it gets really interesting, because Maya and Nick don't just leave it at a vague metaphor. Their dialogue actually breaks down the literal components of this invisible machine, this factory. They identify three main gears driving the assembly line.
Let's hear them.
First, competition without conscience. Second, accumulation without limit. And third, comparison without end. And I really want to spend a moment on that last part, comparison without end, because it speaks so directly to the daily experience of the modern individual.
Oh, absolutely.
We are taught from our very first day in school that more is objectively better. You start out renting a small apartment, but the map tells you to want a starter home. You get the starter home, you're supposed to want a larger house and a better zip code. You get the large house, you want the bespoke mansion. And even the person living in the mansion is like scrolling on their phone, looking at the person who just bought a private island, feeling like they are somehow falling behind.
And the psychological toll of that is just devastating because the destination never stays still. Nick actually describes it as a horizon that recedes exactly as fast as you run toward it.
It's a treadmill.
Oh.
We dress it up in incredibly flattering language to make it palatable. We call it ambition, we call it drive. We praise people for having a relentless work ethic. But Maya points out that it remains a treadmill. No matter how fast you run, no matter how many 60-hour weeks you put in at the office, you never actually arrive.
Never.
The game is not designed to be won. The game is designed to keep you running, because your running is what powers the machine.
Yeah, and Maya ties this directly back to the epidemic of burnout. The source material argues that this architecture is exactly why millions of people are chronically anxious, lonely, and financially stressed out of their minds, despite living in an era of unprecedented global wealth.
Right. We've never been richer, but we've never felt poorer.
Exactly. And the system's only answer to your exhaustion is to tell you to work harder, or to buy a new productivity app to fix your life, or to go on an expensive wellness retreat to fix your mindset.
The system tells you to optimize your morning routine so you can squeeze out an extra hour of productivity for the factory.
Yes. And the profound realization that Maya and Nick try to instill in their dialogue is that the self might not be the problem at all. You are a biologically cooperative organism desperately trying to survive on a treadmill of infinite accumulation. The exhaustion, the depression, the feeling of never being enough, Maya argues these are the most natural, logical responses possible to a deeply unnatural system.
Well, this brings up a massive, completely pragmatic question. If the water we are swimming in is toxic, and the machine governing our lives is fundamentally defective, what is the alternative? Does their dialogue suggest we just abandon society? Do we sell all our possessions, move into a cabin in the woods, and live completely off the grid?
The Walden approach.
Exactly. Because for the vast majority of people listening to this, that is not a feasible or even desirable answer.
And Maya and Nick anticipate that exact pushback. They are very clear that the first step to surviving this architecture is not running away to the woods, nor is it, organizing a violent revolution. The very first crucial step they identify is metacognition.
Metacognition, meaning stepping back to observe the very thoughts and assumptions we are having in real time.
Precisely. It is becoming aware of your own awareness. To go back to the time traveler's fish, the fish can never question the quality of the water until it realizes that water actually exists as a separate entity from itself.
That makes total sense.
Maya argues that we cannot begin to redesign our societal system, or even our own individual lives, until we see the inherited map for what it truly is, which is a human creation. The economy, the corporate ladder, the definition of success, these are not natural laws like gravity. They are operating systems written by human beings, which means they can be rewritten by human beings.
And Maya suggests this starts by shifting the literal questions we ask ourselves every day, right? Like, instead of looking at the map and asking, how do I succeed on this specific map? You step back and ask, who drew this map, and do their interests actually align with mine?
Right.
Instead of asking, how do I acquire more? You ask a truly revolutionary question for a consumer society, which is, what is enough?
That's a scary question for a lot of people.
It is. And instead of asking, how do I beat my neighbor for this promotion? You ask, what could my neighbor and I build together?
And that shift in questioning moves the entire focal point of human existence from I to we. Maya and Nick actually spend a significant portion of the text providing historical evidence that we is the only reason our species survived at all. The dialogue completely strips away the modern myth of the solitary genius.
Yeah, I found those historical examples in the text just undeniable. Every single monumental achievement in human history was a massive collective effort. The establishment of the first agricultural cities, the creation of the internet,
Yeah.
the sequencing of the human genome, the Apollo moon landing,
None of that was done alone.
not a single one. No individual accomplished any of those things by themselves. We built civilization through collaboration.
Yet the inherited map tells us the exact opposite. Nick points out that the water we swim in is saturated with narratives idolizing the rugged individualist. We worship the self-made billionaire, the isolated tech visionary, the lone wolf. We are fed a worldview divided purely into individual winners and individual losers.
Nye actually uses the word propaganda to describe this, doesn't she?
She does.
She argues that the story of the self-made, isolated success is a form of cultural propaganda designed to keep people divided. Because if we are constantly competing against each other, comparing our square footage and our job titles, we are way too exhausted to look up and question the machine itself.
And that observation highlights what Maya considers the most dangerous aspect of this invisible architecture. The most dangerous part of the story we live inside is that we don't know it's a story. We mistake the narrative for absolute reality.
Right.
But once you begin practicing that metacognition, once you see the water, once you recognize that the relentless competition and the treadmill of infinite accumulation are just a localized, inherited narrative, you can never unsee it. The illusion basically shatters.
The lock on the cage was just a story, and the story was never even ours to begin with. It was just handed to us.
Exactly. Maya argues that this realization is the beginning of genuine human freedom. Recognizing that the cage isn't actually locked allows you to step outside the prescribed map.
Wow. Well, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to quickly recap the journey we just took through Maya and Nick's dialogue, because it really does fundamentally challenge how we operate day to day. We started by recognizing the invisible water of societal norms, the inherited map that defines success and failure for us before we were even born.
Right.
We looked at how Maya dismantled the myth that humans are naturally cutthroat, uncovering the hardwired evolutionary neuroscience of our mirror neurons and oxytocin. Those prove we are biologically built for connection, not endless competition.
A crucial point.
And finally, we explored the defective factory of our modern operating system, really looking at their argument that our collective burnout is a symptom of a machine demanding infinite accumulation, rather than a personal failing of our own work ethic.
Which brings Maya and Nick to the concept of an infallible society, which is a brief idea mentioned right at the end of their dialogue. They propose that a society aligned with human nature, rather than opposed to it, is actually possible.
And the most empowering takeaway from their text is that the first step toward that better society isn't electing a new government tomorrow or burning down the global economy. The very first step is exactly what you are doing right now. It is a shift in perception. It is simply becoming aware of the water.
And to help solidify that shift, I want to leave you with a thought exercise derived from Maya and Nick's text. It's a way to test the water in your own daily routine. Take a look at your calendar or your to-do list for tomorrow. Look at the specific tasks that are taking up the vast majority of your time, and especially pay attention to the ones causing you the most anxiety and stress.
Okay.
Now, imagine if the machine we talked about was suddenly turned off. If the societal pressure for infinite accumulation and endless comparison just vanished overnight. How many of those tasks on your list would actually matter to your fundamental biological human need for connection and purpose? What invisible story are your daily habits telling?
Man, that is a brilliant question to end on, because the map you've been exhaustively following might not be leading you where you actually want to go. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Maya and Nixa dialogue. Keep questioning the map, keep an eye out for the defective machines, and remember, don't forget to occasionally ask yourself how the water is today. Take care, everyone.